We fundraised over $500 million, which is totally unheard of.
Is that a sustainable approach?
Look,
Kees Kruijthof.
I started working at Unilever in my early 20s.
In respect to just not quite becoming the CEO, what were your feelings towards that happening?
But let me be very clear, this sounds very rational and ultimately there was a feeling about rejection.
How was that transition for you, working 27 years in, I guess, a 9-to-5 to essentially being your own boss?
I think many things changed, but what did not change is...
So you build basically this whole infrastructure at some point behind the Livekindly Collective. You clearly have the know-how. Why did you end up leaving then?
Everything was going in the boom and then the bust came.
Kees, thank you very much for joining my podcast, first of all. I find it important to start all podcasts with the same question because usually it sets the tone for the rest of the conversation. And that question is, are you happy?
What a nice question, and it's great to be here. Yes, I am extremely happy, and I'm born happy. I live a happy life, and I cannot be more blessed in my life. So the answer is a straight yes. I am happy.
What, in your opinion, is required to live a happy life?
It's many things create happiness. I think, love is all around, and I think that's one part of happiness. The second part of happiness is, for me personally, is that I feel gratification, I feel relevant, I feel is that I contribute, and that is, to the inner circle of my life, and that's obviously my beautiful wife and my 5 daughters and the extended family around it. Mm-hmm. But it's also, in balance with the planet, in balance with the extended world around us, and so therefore love is one thing. Contribution is the other. Like Obama said, be useful, be fearless, and be kind. I think those 3 creates a lot of this spirit of happiness.
Beautifully said. Do you believe we should chase happiness?
Look, I think chase is never a good word. Chase has a energy of speed, has an energy of hurry, has an energy of restlessness, and so I think is that happiness is more something of a state in something like mindfulness, and that energy I think is more around happiness. There are moments in life is that this notion of speed and chasing will be important, but I don't think is that it should be around happiness.
Do you think, regarding that time in your life, would you describe your 20s that way?
No, I don't think is that. I have been in a time of chasing. I think is
ever.
No, I don't think so. I've been in times of speed, and I've been in times of restlessness. That for sure. But I don't think is that once again is that chase is the right thing.
Right.
I'm very ambitious. I've always been very ambitious from my young age. But again, I think it is more step by step understanding, what your true north is. What do I really want to achieve? And then, building a plan around that. And like life, life comes around and therefore, at times it goes the way you have anticipated it. Sometimes you get curveballs, but that's also what life is all about. And I think this notion of happiness also in times, when the world doesn't go the way you want it, is actually very, very, very important.
Yeah. In general, what would you describe your 20s like then?
My 20s, I did my university study in Rotterdam. I did international business there, and so the first part of my 20s was this whole notion about starting to get more consciousness and awareness about my own talents, about my passion, what do I really want in life, and so I think that's a part of the discovery journey of your early 20s. I started working at Unilever in my early 20s, and so therefore between the middle of my 20s until the end of my 20s was also about really starting in my early career and early family. And so this is also about being clear what you want to do, but it is very, very clearly also the early stage of career and family. My first daughter was born,
right?
And so actually a very happy time, a very time of discovery, but early steps both in career and family.
Right. I find it intriguing that you use the word passion, because with this podcast, I'm trying to figure out certain research hypothesis. Essentially, I use the podcast as research for a book that I aim to write. And one of those hypotheses is that passion equals purpose. What's your opinion on that?
No, I fully am in the same thinking space. I've always said is that I come from a family with a mother, very intellectual mother. Her mother was actually the first female who studied both math and science here in the Netherlands.
Okay.
And so, it comes from a very intellectual but also very Calvinistic background. And as you know, Calvinistic background is not to waste talents.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start with thinking about, where are my talents and how can I maximize my talents and how can I perform the best to my talents is one part of it. I also come from a father who is incredible energetic, and he has an incredible passion between and behind everything what he does. He's 88 years old now. He did his PhD when he was 80, and so you see is that that comes together.
Yeah,
and so I've been grown up in a family like that. And very early on in my life, I realized is that I was not only born in a very privileged situation, but also with talents. And so this passion and purpose and how do you give back and how do you maximize your talents and what does it mean in life to be basically take responsibility to give back was absolutely critically important. And that has emerged over time. And, being part of now 30 years in business, I realized is that as business, you need to be passionate to be able to give back to society. We call that net positive. And so this passion for business as a force for good and purpose is absolutely fully, in my mind, 100% linked.
For that, you are, I believe, referring to Paul Polman's book, The Net Positive, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
He's the former CEO of Unilever?
Yeah, 10 years CEO of Unilever.
And your mentor, I guess? Or
look, I don't think mentor is actually the right word, but for sure he's a friend.
Yeah.
By now, he has been 10 years my boss.
Yeah.
When he was CEO of Unilever, I was in the Unilever global executive team. Together we were leading Unilever, and it was a very special time because it was a time when we created the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan basically said is that we wanted to go back to the original founding father of Unilever, which was Lord Leverhulme. And he actually was a social entrepreneur in Victorian England. Very early on, he realized is that business actually needed to be a force for good. And his whole mission was to make hygiene commonplace. And actually, we translated that relevance for now in the society. And so what we talked about is to make sustainable living commonplace. We very clearly understand is that the world has many challenges, but it all ladders up to the challenge around inequality and to climate change. And we as Unilever, as a business which is 150 billion with a footprint of 180 countries, we feel the responsibility to do that. And so 10 years of working together with Paul and the rest of the team to be able to define and understand is that relevance and purpose and actually also performance, because when you are more relevant to society, you also perform better, especially in a fast-moving consumer goods company, and that they are totally linked. We were very fortunate is that Paul was asked by the United Nations to actually to help develop the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so all this thinking actually started to emerge around sort of between 2009 and 2019. And that was at the heart when, this whole movement of business as a force for good actually came to fruition.
Yeah. On the topic of Unilever, so you, from what I could see, you worked there for 27 years, right?
Correct.
You came in as like a brand accountant, executive, I think was the title.
As an assistant brand manager, as the title is.
Exactly, and worked your way all the way up to this chairman of cosmetics.
Actually, as president for home care, one of the three divisions.
My apologies.
No, it's very, very good. It's exactly the same thought.
Yeah. So I feel like these days that is unheard of anymore. Like working in a company for 27 years, it's crazy. What made you want to stay there so long? Maybe that's a first question.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So I think there's two parts of the answer to this, and the first part is a little bit of an odd answer, but looking back, life is like that. And very strangely, when I walked in on the 1st of February 1993, we talk about here in the Netherlands, in the Nassaukade in Rotterdam, there was a factory. It was part of Unilever Foods. It was actually a margarine factory. And I walked in and I thought, what I've seen and what this company stands for and what it can create and how we can help to shape it into its next phase of its development. Very early on, actually, I said, I love this business so much, I would love to be CEO of this company. And so there was a thought of longevity and contribution in that first idea. The second thought is that 27 years sounds like a hell of a long time. And obviously, when you look at it, it is a hell of a long time, but it never feels like a hell of a long time. And the reason is that every time and again, when, I was at the end of my development curve, a next thing came. And when you continue to have three thoughts, which I always refer to as absolutely critical in this. The first one is that you feel you can contribute. Personally, you contribute to the business and the business success, but also that business contributes positively. So that's the first thing in the point of making a difference. Mm-hmm. The second one is personal development. And, in everything, to stay curious, to continue to learn, to be able to have personal development. And when every time when you're at your end of your learning curve and you get the next role for accelerated learning, that is an important part. So actually over 27 years, I've always felt is that I continue to be learning. And the third one, which we should not forget, is the joy of business, having fun, being with people who you like and love, that there is a culture where you can be truly yourself, and that you have, this joy of business. And so every of these three elements basically almost stayed there for 27 years. Imagine I started in the Netherlands, then I went to South Africa when I was 29 years old. I became part of the leadership team in Unilever South Africa. Then I went to Singapore. I lived early 2000s in China. Can you imagine what an excitement that is? You know, that was a different China than it is today. Back to South Africa, then to London, then to Brazil, then to New York, then to London. And so what an unbelievable journey it is. So I've been looking back, and suddenly 27 years was done.
Exactly.
So it has never been this thing about routine, and that it starts to get into a mode of routine. Other than, is that this was just part of one overall journey. For the rest, it was filled with unbelievable experiences, learnings, and excitement. So definitely a journey to look back at in full both gratification and joy.
I assume your family always went with you every time you moved, right?
Yeah, look, we have a little bit of a strange setup in our family.
Okay.
And so out of the 5 daughters, the oldest is actually an adopted Zulu daughter.
Okay.
And so when I arrived in South Africa, she actually was the daughter of our nanny. And so she joined our family when she was 3. And since then, she's always been a part of the family.
Right.
Actually, today we celebrate one of the girls' their birthday, and so Mandisa, our adopted Zulu daughter, is here with us as well in the Netherlands today.
Congratulations!
Thank you so much. Then I have 2 girls from my first wedding. From my first marriage, I should say. And so they actually stayed in Holland with their mother whilst we were traveling from one location to the next. But they were always part of it. And so every 28 days, either they came to us or I came to them. And so this, journey all around the world has been all-inclusive with all of the girls, but not every day. And then in Brazil, as I said, the one who turns 15 today, she was born today, 15 years ago in Brazil, and the youngest was also born in Brazil. So since then, we lived in Brazil, in the US, in South Africa, in the Netherlands, in Verbier, back into the Netherlands. So basically, it is a total journey of the family.
Yeah. It leads me to be intrigued what your answer then is to the next question. That is, are there downsides to chasing your passion?
So once again, I don't think it's chasing my passion, but I think it's
maybe it's
following.
a better word.
Yeah, and so I believe this concept of true north is really, really important. Is you put what is really long term, what is your compass? Where do you go? Where are your values? And one of the most important things is that you're that one holistic person, and you are that person in every part of your life, whether it is in your business life, whether it is in your family life, whether it is with friends or whatever it is. And once you set out that compass, that is an anchor point for and whatever happens then on that journey, you can continue to have the anchor. So I think that's the first and most important thing.
Okay.
Of course, there's downsides to it. For me, one of the big downsides is that if you have a very big ambition, there's something, if you don't achieve it, how do you actually manage self in that? As I said to you, I was very passionate to become CEO of Unilever. I went all the way towards being president, first of North America and then of one of the divisions. But at the end, I did not become CEO of Unilever. And so that was something for me where you then come to the challenge. How do you deal with that? And I think is that, to be able to go deep enough into your own feelings in terms of what does that mean, and, how much is your ego telling you and in communication with self, and how much is, basically the realization is that it was just, something to achieve, but it's not the only way to be able to contribute. And so if you then go back to your true north and say, what is the why behind why do you want that, and how do you can then actually take and reset is absolutely critically important. So I believe that is the most important part of this, having a big ambition for contribution, but it's just there's a bigger end to it, and that is the why you want to achieve it.
You mentioned understanding your feelings in respect to, just not quite becoming the CEO. What were your feelings towards that happening?
Yeah, look, first, there was a feeling of rejection. And, very clearly that's the case because, the board looked at it and said, you're actually not the one. So then there's actually Otto Scharmer wrote this a book about the you theory. And so you need to go through the you, where you first suspend your judgment, understand what basically is happening, and then you're on the bottom of the you, and then on the other side you can come out. And when you do this, you learn again, and then you include and transcend, and that means is that you can do the next thing again from better and deeper understanding. Yeah. But let me be very clear. This sounds very rational, and ultimately there was a feeling about rejection. There was a feeling about frustration, and then how is it possible? These are obviously very human questions. Yeah. Having said that, Unilever has so much talent, and it is at the end when you're left with 1, 2, maybe 3 candidates for a role like that. Everybody can do the job. The question is for a board is what in this phase of what is most required for what the strategic agenda for the company is, and who is the best fit for it. Yeah. And so that is basically then the judgment of the board and the nominating committee to say this is the right person. Yeah. And that's at the end it's a judgment call. As I said, I was disappointed that I couldn't do it because I would have loved to do it. Yeah. But that's just part of how things go.
Yeah. As a result, you end up leaving Unilever after 27 years, and you become the co-founder of Livekindly.
Yeah, I did a couple of things. The first one is I started traveling with my girls one by one. So the 5 girls and with Sabine because, I suddenly had time at hand and I wanted to reflect. And so it was a very unique time. And so this is now the middle of 2019. And traveling with the girls and is also good for reflection and just what we were talking about. So that's the first thing I did. The second thing I did was together with Paul Polman and then Valerie Keller and Jeff Seabright. We co-founded a company called Imagine. Mm-hmm. We wanted to basically take the 10 years of the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, and we wanted to make sure that all those learnings actually went, and we gave that to courageous CEOs. We believe is that many of the corporate global CEOs is that inherently they are real good people. They really want to do the best, both for the company and for society at whole. And so we wanted to give them both a real content and expertise about how you can put purpose at the core of your business model. And what does that mean in terms of when you do that properly and you put it in the hedgehog of where you really make money, it is truly sustainable, and then that means is that the performance will go up. So that's the first thing what we did, and this was I joined that from the United Nations General Assembly in September 2019, and we just integrated Imagine into a company which Jeremy Oppenheim founded with basically 300 plus mainly ex-McKinsey consultants, and that's called systemic.earth, and they're passionate about system change and putting climate at the core of how you change system, whether that's in nature, whether that's energy, or whether that's in food. And so that's the first thing we did, and again, you see this theme coming, and that is how can we contribute, and that is business as a force for good. The second thing I did was together with a Swiss serial entrepreneur, a guy called Roger Lienhard. He came to me, and he was a passionate around the food transformation. And so this is an understanding is that the global food system is broken. It's a huge system. It's actually close to 20% of the global economy. And if you start to realize that food system is actually built for 3.5 billion people, and not for the current 9 billion people. So we've gone into a system where we live on a legacy system which is just totally unsustainable.
Yeah.
If you look at 91% of the Amazon deforestation is linked just because we are eating meat in life. And so there's many parts where you realize is that whilst you when you learn about the true impact of our current food system, you realize is that needs to change. That needs to change from animal to plant-based. It needs to change, from chemicals to organic food. It needs to change from, obesity and sugar and fat into personal, nutritious, affordable, good food. It needs to change from too much of a global system to a local food system where you put the farmers again in the right in the right way in the system. And so that is basically the lenses of the change of the food system needed. And we actually took one of those lenses, and that is to change from an animal to a plant-based food system. So as you said, we founded a company, Livekindly Collective, where we had as a mission to basically to go from startup to scale up to a global multi-billion. We wanted to create a plant-based food company. So that's what we started. We started it early 2020, and then an incredible journey.
Yeah. Few questions. First, maybe most obvious one: are you vegan?
I am actually almost vegan. To be 100% vegan is a big challenge.
Yeah.
And so I don't eat meat. I love red wine and cheese, and so that's very difficult for me to get out of my diet.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And once in a while, I do eat fish. We know is that scientifically, if you're 100% vegan, you miss B12, and so you need to compensate for that. But ultimately, it does say a couple of things. The first one is that consumers will not compromise. Like I'm not compromising my red wine and cheese. And when and if you have a perfect alternative, then there's no issue. And so this is an insight of consumer insight when people are truly, willing and able to be able to do that means is that there needs to be good alternatives, both nutrition-wise, cost-wise, and most important in food, taste-wise. And so the short answer, no, I'm not 100% vegan, but yes, I am very close, and we call it actually to be a flexitarian. And that is my diet.
No worries. The second follow-up question would be indeed of what you mentioned cost-wise, right? So I can imagine, or how have you experienced, at least within the company, getting people to purchase vegan products? Because usually they are still quite pricey, right? I feel like if you want a vegan lifestyle, it's a luxury lifestyle because they are quite expensive. Indeed, in terms of affordability, do you believe that if we would make these things cheaper, that then also more people would adopt that lifestyle, I guess?
Yeah, no, the answer is yes, for sure. So there's a couple of thoughts to this question. The first one is, the theory of system change. And so this total system need to change because then, you get volume into the system and because of volume, you get cost lower. But it also is about, how do you get true cost in the system? And so I've always said, what needs to happen for system change is three big things needs to happen. The first one is a conscious consumer. The consumer need to consciously choose and have a preference for sustainable products. And that is where the consciousness of consumers sit. The second one is courageous leaders. We need to have business leaders who actually are daring and are having the courage to be able to jump. And the third one is we need to have true cost in the system. So just take this example, and you take animal-based chicken versus plant-based chicken, and you take Germany, where you live, as an example. The added value tax of plant-based chicken in Germany is 18%, and the added value tax of animal-based chicken is 9%. Well, the impact on society is actually totally the opposite. And so we know is that, chicken only live 42 days. They are being basically created and fed and grown to be eaten. And, is that whole system has a negative impact on the planet. If you turn that around and you actually come from yellow peas or to fava beans and, you grow that in the right way and you put that into the soil, actually you regenerate the soil. And so then you have a protein source, what actually is a regenerative source for Mother Earth. Mm-hmm. And so instead of 18 and 9, it should be either 0, actually positive, but anyway, for now, just put it on 0 added value tax, value VAT. And then on animal-based chicken, that should be like 18%. And so you need to have true cost in the system.
Yeah.
So just think about it fast forward. And you think about it 10 years' time or 15 years' time, whatever the time frame is. Then you come to a stage is that people and governments, the Green Deal in Europe, you see it now in subsidies in the US behind green businesses. Europe needs to compete against that. We all know is that actually the subsidies, which is now on unsustainable food, will go from subsidies actually first to 0 and then to tax. And you will get actually this part of the food system will go from higher tax, as I just explained, to lower and then to 0. If and when that happens, the system starts to change. And if you think longer term, actually plant-based chicken versus animal-based chicken, there is a lower cost totally in it. Also, if you take the definition of current cost, And why? I've always said, if you go into a value chain and you cut out the middleman, there's always lower cost in the system. So we're cutting out the middleman in the total system, but this time it's the chicken, because actually what the chicken is a very inefficient factory, because actually the chicken eats the protein and you get the protein only, through the chicken.
Yeah.
So that's the way to do it. So in summary, you're absolutely right. At the moment, it's still, for the happy few who can afford it. It's for those who really understand and make the choice, the conscious choice. But ultimately, the system needs to change. And the good news is that if you look at it economically, is that you will end up with a food system which is cheaper, 20% cheaper to be clear, and more nutritious, and then plant-based. So that's where we're going.
Yeah.
This will go up and down, and so you have a trend, you will grow, you have what we call a boom, then you have a bust, you have a boom again, like the internet. It all went boom, bust, etc. But we all know where the end destination is. That's why true north and understanding what really needs to happen is so important.
Right. Let's go back to Unilever a little bit. After 27 years, or well, not Unilever technically, but after 27 years, you leave Unilever and you start then not one, but two companies yourself, apparently. How was that transition for you, working 27 years in, I guess, a 9 to 5, probably more, to essentially being your own boss?
Look, I think many things changed, and but what did not change is my working pattern, because in Unilever, I worked 24/7. I traveled a lot. I was, it's always in your mind, and running that business is complex, and it needs attention and intention to manage that. So for sure, I was in it for 24/7. Starting from scratch and building your own business was even more intense. And so you're absolutely right there. My wife always says, I didn't have a 9 to 5 job.
Yeah.
I had a 5 to 9 job.
Yeah, exactly.
And I literally worked those hours. So what really was very different is that you start from nothing, absolutely from scratch, white piece of paper, a very clear destination, but nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that obviously feels different, because, in Unilever, you have the whole infrastructure around you. Many very, very good, ambitious people. And so when something needed to be done, you just ask a couple of people. And so there is something here in the total, system, which is both intellectually, then operationally, but also in the day-to-day system, whether there's offices and support and secretaries and all is being organized for you. Towards starting absolutely for yourself. Which means is that a couple of things are really different. So one, there's no infrastructure to fall back on. The second one is cash is king. And so suddenly you realize is that you look on your bank account and, as Unilever, I never looked at the Unilever bank account. Cash was always there. And now suddenly, I had to look at, what is the balance, and can we say yes to buying this new machine? And so that is a very, very different thing. So, we obviously started with fundraising. And that was something I'd never done in my life, to go out first to friends and family, then to institutional investors, then to private equity. And we ended up with a cap table of real conscious investors and conscious capital, as I call it. And so we fundraised over $500 million, which is totally unheard of.
Yeah.
And so you start to do all kinds of other things, totally different and new things, and you literally have no system, so you don't know yet what you sell, and all that you need to put in place.
You indeed say you raised over $500 million, which is an unbelievable amount of money. Is that a sustainable approach?
Look, it's a very good question. And so looking back, I think there's many learnings in there. The first thing is, if we would not have raised so much money, then the business would have been at risk now. And so because we raised so much money, actually the business is still there. And because you only die in a business if you run out of cash. And we had so much cash. So that is actually a way to sustain the business and therefore the journey and its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You know what happened? This industry really went into boom, into bust again. If you look 10, 15 years out, 20 years out, we will get back ultimately to that stage. But at the moment, there's a different phase. There's a phase of food inflation in the world because of the Ukraine. There's a phase of energy costs. So consumers are actually really pulling back. And that means is that, the momentum and the choices which consumers make is not in favor of plant-based food at the moment. So that means is you first need to become smaller before you become bigger again. And so you can only do that.
Sorry, why?
Yeah,
so
let me just finish.
Yeah.
But you can only do that if you have cash. And so, the fact is that you have so much money is actually the lifeline to be able to sustain even when things are going up and down. And this is therefore your insurance to be able to have a long-term longevity of the business.
Because I struggle to get on board with the VC approach, right? I feel like that is what has become the norm in society in order to push towards profit much quicker. But I feel like the sort of old school, you make a product, you sell it for a profit, and you start building on that, and the margins you have from that, you don't hire someone until you actually have the profit that you can afford them. I realize it takes a lot longer. Hence why people, decided to getting capital, getting investments to push that even faster to get towards profitability. Because as you said, scale equals profit makes sense. To me, though, it also seems like that is the cause of why a lot of businesses go under. Because they take on a lot of money, maybe go too fast almost. And as a result, don't build enough stability in the organization in order to build a sustainable company.
There's many thoughts which you've just raised. If you think about Amazon, just think about how Amazon's journey came. If you think about Tesla, just think about how Tesla. And these are obviously, unbelievable businesses who have changed the face of business. One, obviously, a system started in e-commerce in books. And then there was many ways is that Amazon could sustain its business. The first was just because they had investors who wanted to be there for the long run, who realized is that actually if you invest for the long run and you believe in that, is that it is okay to be able to have your cost before the business really becomes profitable. AWS was obviously a key element on that journey. And so I think that's one. The second one is, gosh, we are lucky is that actually Elon Musk sustained what he did. That's why, the mobility industry has totally transformed. Without Tesla, that would have never happened. We finally see is that the legacy industry also starts to change. We finally see is that now by 2035 is that no cars not on EV are not allowed to be sold in Europe. So you see is that, having and building the business for the long term, including investing for a return later, is a way of total system change. So let's be very clear. that there's always in systems that there are unintended consequences of a model, and that there is no perfect model is absolutely clear. And so, yes, of course, sometimes there is too much money in the beginning, not well handled, and then, a business goes under. In the case of Livekindly Collective, it actually has been a different case. So the first one is, as I said, this up and down, boom and bust happens, especially also in plant-based. And we know is that ultimately it will be there. So if you can sustain, you can actually position yourself even in the downturn as being the natural consolidator going forward. And if you actually get into that position, you are the winner for the future. So that is good that you have more capital for it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that actually we invested in the long term. And so we used capital, for example, to build and to create an infrastructure which was totally sustainable, the best infrastructure in the industry. The first part of that infrastructure was the factories. We have a factory here in the Netherlands, in Os. It is second to none. It's the most sizable, best factory in plant-based in the world. It is robotized. It has everything to be able to indeed beat that cost curve. If you put the right volume through it, then you get to a cost curve which is cheaper than animal-based. So you actually invest ahead. And so we've always said, you start with the future and you fold the future back in. And when you do it like that, you actually do the right things for a sustainable business today.
Yeah.
And you only can really compete into the future if you can scale it. So that is why, this needs a lot of investment in the beginning phase of it. And so different models, different phases, always unintended consequences of models, but it's absolutely fundamental for this part to be able to sustainably put the infrastructure in place. And so brands and brand portfolio, better products and quality, a factory infrastructure which can scale, and an IT infrastructure which can scale with people who have the ability to manage that.
So you build basically this whole infrastructure at some point behind the Livekindly Collective. You clearly have the know-how. Why did you end up leaving then?
As what happened is everything was going in the boom, and then the bust came. And that's what we just said in life. Things happen like that, and it never goes, with a straight line up. And so you have a point, you have a destination, and that will be fine. But in on the journey, there will be booms and busts.
Yeah.
So that's what happened.
Right.
We were going to go public in the New York Stock Exchange. We would go to do that with a SPAC. We had a SPAC partner. We had a PIPE.
For those that don't know what's a SPAC?
A SPAC is actually a way. There are three ways to be able to become a publicly listed company. And so one is a traditional IPO, but there's an alternative one, and that is actually that there is already a company which is on the stock exchange. It's actually a company which only has as asset capital, and it can be there only for 2 years. And if you merge with a company like that, then that's the way to go public. And so we were all ready to do that early January 2022, and then to ring the bell in June last year. But that was the moment, is that the world totally changed. And when the world changed, it goes fast. So the first thing is people did not want to invest anymore in growth companies because, the whole environment changed from everybody was in favor of growth companies and investing behind it towards, no, we need to secure our capital and we invest in companies which give dividends. Why? Because the world totally changed. The Ukraine war obviously was an unbelievable shock to the system. The energy prices, we've seen what happened to the gas pricing. And so that put a total fright in it. And don't forget, that was a global fear after an earlier global fear, which was called COVID. And so you get this notion about, the health system and in fear, then, the economic system in fear, and you see it again today with Credit Suisse and the SVB. And so we're continuously going through these moments of shock. And when the world is in fear, people are taking different choices. And that was definitely, therefore, in terms of we needed to hibernate the business for sustainable development. And so instead of, at scale, at speed, from startup to scale up to a global multi-billion business, in literally, you go from nothing to 5 billion in, say, 3 to 5 years. You now need to do it step by step. Otherwise, you break the camel's back.
Yeah.
And so you really now need to manage it for cost. You need to manage it for cash. And I am obviously, far too expensive. Also not good at it because, I am used to hyper and lots of complexity to manage. And so, to only go on cost and on cash on a relative small business, I'm not the right person because I'm not the best at it. By the way, I'm too expensive. And the third one, I don't really like it. And what is important for me personally is to stay close to who I am and what I need to do. And as I said earlier, I need to really feel is that this is where I make a contribution, that I maximize my talents, and that my full potential is really being used.
Yeah.
And so, with a total change of strategy, which, by the way, I personally decided on, this was just not the right fit anymore.
I find it fascinating that is the real story because I also read a lot of articles with people's opinions about this. And when you look at these articles, they are very negatively tainted.
Yeah.
Why do you think they are?
I think the reality is that there's many realities. So first, it's a complex world out there, and there's many opinions there. We have lots of benefits of social media, but also again unintended consequence that people can
also give negative opinions.
No, not that. That is not the issue, but also is that there is a lot of noise out of there. I think
exactly.
Is a better way to put it. So I think that's the first point.
Yeah.
The second thing is don't forget is that there is a whole industry, a total industry, who is there to be able to support the legacy industry. And in transformation, you always will see is that, how many people are actually pulling and pushing backwards. You see that in the energy transformation. Look how difficult it is to get the oil companies truly in the transformation.
Yeah.
They earned 240 billion additional profit last year. And actually, if anything, hardly any additional money is being invested in the energy transformation. That's because the legacy system is so strong. And so you also get that here in the legacy system. Look what the whole discussion about, the farmers and, the issues around what needs to happen with farming. And, are we sure is that it is not better to keep, the meat industry? Should we have meat tax or not? All of these things is also pulled back always because of the legacy system. So I believe is that it is very natural. Is that, in physics, once there's an action, there's always a reaction in the system. And what you need to do is that then there is the point of inflection. And so you need to beat the downturn through the point of inflection. Now, that is the theoretic logic of what needs to happen. Am I convinced that this is happening? The answer is yes. And so that is probably a better fit for me.
Exactly.
Especially in the phase of where the world is. Because I would have loved, if Livekindly would have gone indeed on the journey which we have anticipated. That would have been an absolute great journey, but you need to be flexible to adapt.
Do you consider that experience a failure?
No. If I would live my life through the lens of failure, that's not how I choose to live my life.
Yeah.
And B, what an unbelievable experience it has been. It was absolutely unique, unbelievable. And it's like, it's like a boy's book writing. In Dutch, you would say a more jongensboek.
Yeah.
And every book like that has different chapters. This was a unique chapter, and so I recognize it as how unique to be able to go from running a 50 billion company together towards a total startup from nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
What a learnings I have done, and I believe I've been an inspiration also by doing that for many. I've always said that when I was part of Unilever, I was also already a real passionate entrepreneur. I believe you can be an entrepreneur, whether you would do that in big companies, in own startups, in medium size, whatever. You can be an entrepreneur in every different phase of these businesses.
Yeah.
So I see it as, an unbelievable time, great learnings, and, many, many things. Would have I love to have and seen a different outcome? The answer is very clear. That's basically what it is. But
because the reason why I asked that question is a lot of people even stop trying, or like don't even get started. Maybe is a better way to say it, for the fear of failure. So I'm trying to understand where, in your opinion, does your mindset come from, that you do not look at it as something to hold you back, but rather as an experience to have learned from, to now implement in the other things that you do?
No, look, I think is that it first comes from a basic sense of confidence, and confidence can also be an overconfident. So you need to balance that. The conviction which I have is that, if you put your right intent and your true north at the center, your values at the center of everything what you do, if you do it in the right way, if you do it with energy and passion, if you do it with the right intent, whatever you do, it will be a positive part of the journey. And so I was part of this book, which is called Lef, is courage, and Lef and Lief, they created. Why? Because this was having the courage to start your own business, to have the courage to start your own business with an unbelievable ambition, to have the courage to start your own business also in a conscious business. And all of these together, creates obviously risk, and that is the reality of leadership. If you are not prepared to be able to stand out, if you're not prepared to have a very clear point of view, if you are not prepared to be able to, take that, then of course, you will not have the impact. You will have not the risk. But it is absolutely, these things are linked. So I think the most important thing here is about confidence. It is about courage. It's about leadership, and that is the way to beat the opposite of that, because the brain always works like that, right? The little voice in your mind always talks about, risk and are you sure, and fear, and, personal reputation, and things like that. And that is exactly what we need to collectively and individually need to overcome.
Fair. As you see, there's a little jar in front of you. What I did was I ended up collecting community questions. So I would like you to take one out of the jar, read it out, and also who asked it, and then give your answer to this question.
Okay. I think I have an issue because I didn't bring my glasses.
Oh, I can read. I can read it for you if you want. No worries. Oh, that one's actually been done before.
Okay.
I'll pick another one for you.
Yeah.
So this one's actually from my girlfriend.
Okay, nice.
Whose personal story would you like to hear and why?
Look, let me start by saying is that I love all personal stories, and I'm, connected and curious, and I used to be a person who was probably a bit small-minded, and I actually learned to be and realize how beautiful each individual all around this planet is. And so, we've had on our journey all around the world, we have had so many incredible experiences and learnings. In South Africa, I learned what true diversity was all about. I came there in the phase of the transformation. It's that Mandela was just handing over to Mbeki, and the whole country was in transformation. I had the privilege actually to work together with President Mbeki about the transformation and to build the brand South Africa, to put my skills and talents at service to a country where I was just visiting and, and so what I've learned there in all kinds of stories, how beautiful every individual story is. I lived in Soweto for 2 weeks in a family which was completely new, and you listen to these stories. Then, we were in Brazil, and in Brazil, we were part of a samba school. My wife was the first non-Latin American lady on the top of a carnival float. I was walking together with the mayor of Rio, together with Ronaldo and Ronaldinho there. And you go and you practice. You practice every Sunday in Rio at the samba school, and you listen to those people and their stories. And each individual story is so unique. I lived in China. And we were in China, and we had the most amazing IE. IE is a help in the and so you listen to her story. She was an intellectual. She was actually during the Mao time. She was put to work, and so you listen to her story. So these stories are the most intriguing stories for me always in our lives. You can imagine. Is Mandisa is an adopted Zulu daughter with a very different culture. To listen to her story is always a unique way. But obviously also because of that, we are very much integrated in her family and her story. So many of this, I think, is stories I would love to always hear. So that's, the first and most important thing. That is to be connected to society, that is to listen to each other's stories, to be open, to be mindful, and to be connected and listen to stories, I think is one of the most important things. And, that is the first. Of course, I'm always intrigued and excited to listen to great world leaders' story. As I already quoted, I think Obama with, be useful, be fearless, and be kind, and his story around that. I had the privilege to meet President Mandela, and so we all know his story, but to hear it from him was actually very much of a privilege.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a beautiful question, a bit of a long answer, but, I wanted to give the sentiment how important it is to recognize the beauty of each individual, how unique all the stories are. If you truly are connected and open and have the ability to deeply listen, then you hear different stories. And if you then connect the stories, then I think something special can happen.
It's a beautiful answer. I'm already at my last question now. And that question is, what does the future hold for Kees?
Look, the first one is I turned 50 a couple of years ago, and so 50 years to come. And so, as we call it in America, this is now my second innings. And you realize is that in your second innings, the first thing is that your responsibility even more is to be able to support and to contribute and see how you pay it forward. And I think that is most important thing. The second one is that you do that in a spirit and in a fitness. Fitness starts to become personal health and to have the ability to be able to continue to perform to your maximum potential also starts to be, added because of all the experience and the life experience that you have and the spiritual way of thinking. But actually, make sure is that you have the continuity and the ability to do that. So I think that's a part of life which is just inherent on this part. So the future is that I will continue to follow my true north, that I will continue to be unbelievably ambitious in terms of how and where I can contribute, that I will do that with the big slogan which I've always have, and that is Forever 21. And I want to make sure is that I continue to live my life as Forever 21 with that eagerness of contribution, with that eagerness and that energy to give back, to pay forward, but do that with this notion of lots of love and lots of laughter. And that is, what happiness is ultimately is all around us.
I think that brings it beautifully full circle. Thank you so much for your time today and talking to me. It's been fascinating getting insight at one of the sort of top positioned people in the world. It's been really useful, and thank you.
Thank you.